lookout. Another day, another thousands of acres burned. Welcome to Lookout, where we talk about fire, all the time. Yep, had to pick some sad music today. Just for talking about this Garnet Fire. It's making a lot of people sad. Just read a good essay by a guy named Matt Hertow, who is a fire researcher, academic, spent his whole career working so far. He's my generation or a little younger, spent his whole career working in tea kettle, and wrote a good essay about watching it all fall apart. Watching the Forest Service say they want to do it and then drag their feet, and watching good leadership and bad leadership, and just the journey. He's been there working for a long time. A lot of stuff we've been talking about here, and so I'll put a link up here for it. So we all feel this stuff differently, but this guy spent a lot of time out there. So yeah, check out his essay, and maybe check out his research if you're interested in know more about what's going on in Sierra Nevada. So we're just going to talk mainly about Garnet. We don't have a ton of info, like the webcams. You can see that the fire's really active. The mapping, most recent mapping we've got is a few hours old, from about 2:20 right now, it looks like, this afternoon. But yeah, we're just going to look at some maps and talk about them a little bit, and then I'm not going to talk for an hour and a half about forestry. But for those of you who watched the live stream last night, thanks for checking it out. And if you haven't, you're interested in talking about forestry and some of the obstacles, the practical realities of the politics and the economics that underpin some of these decisions of how we decide to manage forests, check out last night's live stream. Goes in depth. I feel like we end up having a lot of stuff that's buried, like an hour into a live stream. That's good stuff, and I just don't have the bandwidth right now to go back and edit it and everything else. But someday, maybe. In the meantime, we're just sitting in a shack talking to a camera. All right. So, without further ado, here's Garnet Fire. Garnet. I don't know. If you want to learn more about what it did weeks ago, check out our earlier podcasts. But basically, we got the white line on here that is yesterday, the night before last, where the fire was here, kind of backing its way down into Dinky Creek. And then we've got last night's infrared showing the hot areas in orange. Now we got red showing where the fire's gotten to today. So come in a little closer here. We're on the kind of west side of the fire. And don't worry, this fire out here happened in July. This isn't actually hot right now. Anyway, there's contingency line up this ridge, and even though my mapping here is kind of sloppy of that contingency line, infrared so far doesn't really show any kind of meaningful spread by 2 o'clock today over the contingency line up this ridge on the west side of the fire. And so yesterday we kind of predicted that we think this whole upper basin here, kind of all the way up to Camp Fresno, is going to burn out around Dinky Mountain. And so far that looks like it's happening. It didn't make huge runs by 2 o'clock this afternoon. It hadn't done runs like yesterday. But another thing that happened between last night, the orange, and this afternoon is the fire did kind of come cranking up out of McKinley Grove, or out of the creek, Dinky Creek here, and through McKinley Grove. Forest Service posted photos of sprinklers set up out there, and fires. Some embers have landed up in the tops of some of these big trees, and Forest Service is bringing in smoke jumpers to climb the trees to put out the fires in them, which to me is freaking ridiculous, right? So a tree gets fire in it and it burns the top off, and it's an old tree, and having someone monkey up in a tree to put out a giant tree on fire. Like, that's character, right? That's like burnout top of a snag is just like a tattoo for an old tree. All right. So anyway, yeah, one of the problems once a lot of these trees have names. Once you got a tree that has a name, then they're gonna go like wrap it in tinfoil and set up sprinklers and send repellers in there to make sure that the Jim Jones tree or whatever doesn't get his top burnt out. I don't know, man. It's like we'll focus that much energy on a single tree, but we won't like prioritize projects that would prevent this from happening in the first place. Pretty weird. I always get a little tripped out when I see like the kind of national press showing photos of sequoia trees wrapped in tinfoil, because it's like, well, it's a little late. Like maybe you should have like thought about protecting these forests and managing them like 30 years ago instead of like waiting until the last minute and wrapping them in tinfoil and going on TV and saying that you're like doing everything you can to protect the forest. Freaking crazy, man. Crazy world. Anyway, so as far as we can see, we've been talking for the last week about how the fire was like going to be hard to hold on this mid-slope McKinley Grove Road. As of kind of midday, it looked like all this firing they did over here on the northeast corner of the fire seems like it's held pretty well. There's a couple little spots, but I don't have very good intel on that. But we talked, kind of at length about this firing operation out in here and how they needed to get depth before the fire came cranking up out of McKinley or out of Dinky Creek. So, so far so good there as far as like them holding on to this upper portion here north of McKinley Grove Road and going towards Washawn. I was talking to a friend yesterday or the day before, knows a lot about this country, and he said basically he would think that at this point, a couple of days ago, he's like, you should divide the fire in half, basically, and everything kind of to the east of where this power line easement crosses McKinley Grove Road, so right about here, is one fire that's kind of fairly stable, and everything to the west is going to be a total shit show. So he was right. It's nice having friends that it's not just all me pulling like these prognostications out of my booty. Oftentimes I'll call my smart friends. But the sucky part is I can't blame them if I say something and then it's wrong. I can't be like, well, so and so said that was going to happen. Anyway, trying to own it. Anyway, so that's about what we got here. It's just that, yeah, the fire is kind of cranked up out of here. It's established above McKinley Grove. The good news is just that the conditions of kind of are a bit moderated this afternoon. And a lot of the stuff that's burning out here is burning under heavy smoke. So if you can say it's moderated because it only burned like 3,000 acres versus 15, I don't know if that counts. But here's basically what we've seen the last couple of days is that this fire last day and a half has been extremely terrain driven, right? So if you look at the fire got established down here in Dinky Creek and it cranked up sorry, it's a little chunky on the rendering. Let's just go with straight terrain here. All right, so this is Dinky Creek. We've been talking a lot about how this terrain is gnarly. So the bulk of this big run we had yesterday is just slope-driven runs and super heavy fuels in Dinky Creek Canyon. And so now that the fire is kind of eaten a lot of the slope that's available to it, it's going to be kind of behaving differently than often we see this happen. Fires kind of like chow all the kind of, they burn to the top of every hill around. And then once they do, they don't have that momentum. They don't have the slope driving them. So that's what's happened along this whole edge. Fire cranked to the ridge, and now it can't really, the conditions aren't extreme enough for it to like crank downhill on the other side. And so what we've seen here is this enormous run as the fire's gradually eaten all the slope that's available to it. It kind of ran up this slope, ran up the canyon here. Everywhere you're looking, it's had slope to run up, and now it's run up the slope here and up to McKinley Grove. But pretty much once it is out of slope, it's a different fire. And no longer, so what we're going to see is potentially, it's still got slope here available to it to burn out the rest of this Dinky Mountain kind of. And it's got slope here ahead of it. But after that, it's kind of like it starts having to back downhill. And so we're starting to see that happen here. The fire doesn't have quite as much a line slope or like range of topography. It can't like when you look at how much elevation difference there is between the bottom of Dinky Canyon here, which is like 2,500 feet, and the top, which is like 5,000. You had 2,500 feet of vertical slope for the fire to run up. When you get up here, you don't quite have as much. You got Dinky Mountain that's like 6,700, and you got the meadow over here that's like 5,400. So you got a half as much slope for the fire to run. So not to say that the fire is not going to keep gobbling or it's got slope. It's just that the fire is going to change character when it no longer has slope to run up and has to kind of back downhill, especially in kind of fuels like as you get higher into the cedar and the fir, the needle cast up there where you have a lot of snow makes a compact needle bed, fuel bed, and it's harder for the fire to haul ass than it is. Like right now, the fire's hauling ass uphill through brush, through pine needles, and through dead and down. But when it gets up on top here and it has to back downhill, we saw that same basic thing happen over here. On the second, the fire ran hard out of Tea Kettle. And then since then, it's back downhill. But over the past 6 days, basically, the fire, it backed out to here, and it was low enough intensity backing downhill to the road here that they were able to do firing operations. So it gives you kind of a clue as to what this fire does without Mondo slopes to run up. We saw this a lot on the Dixie Fire. The fire would have a period of instability, maybe some light winds that were aligned with the terrain, and the fire would blow up and it'd run to the top of every hill. And then once it did, then it would back down. And so oftentimes too, when the fire backs downhill, we get more beneficial fire effects. So that's kind of the status, is like, okay, it's like halfway done from yesterday, gobbling towards Dinky Mountain. I'm going to pull up our mapping from last night just to kind of give us see if it can give us, okay, 7th. Okay, so like here is a line, put it in yellow, for where the fire was yesterday afternoon at 4. So you can see that in the last kind of 24 hours, the fire spread like almost halfway to kind of Camp Fresno, which is up here, Forked Meadow. So it still seems likely that it's going to burn out this whole box. And it's likely, too, that if it wants to, it's going to kind of make runs across McKinley Grove Road up to the top of the slope here. Like, if the fire wants to do it, it's going to be hard to hold it on this mid-slope road. So, it might burn up into this higher country. But as you get higher, the fuels change and blah, blah, blah. The weather is supposed to be a little bit more cooperative each day. So it's still got some stuff to eat for sure. And we're not going to get too much more predictive than that on where it's headed. So far, so good over here on this kind of eastern half of the fire. And also, the eastern half of the fire is really not showing much new spread at all from the night before last. So over here, kind of by Sugar Pine Hill, we look at where it was yesterday afternoon versus today. This side of the fire didn't really move at all. So yeah, the big spread is over here still, and that's like my buddy said, like tail 2 fires. This side of the fire is fairly done. This side of the fire is got fuel and terrain to drive some more growth. So that's kind of our intel assessment for it today. I'll check out some questions. Give me a second. All right. Sierra National Forest is a perfect example of forest mismanagement, says Dozer 1642. All right. I always appreciate all your guys' comments. Dylan Stevens, how's it going, man? Where do I find my ops maps? Shoot me a email through the lookout, and I'll tell you. Um, I've been looking at the fires up in Washington. No, sorry, I was checking out the fire in Washington where they busted two people on immigration charges because I thought that was an interesting scenario for incident management team, and I think we'll talk more about that particular incident. So I was kind of checking out that Bear Gulch fire just because immigration came and busted two firefighters during the fire. So we'll talk more about that when we get more information. Wendy says they don't have any Jim Jones trees up there, but they do have other trees named after white guys, old white characters. Okay. Cooling trend will moderate the fire behavior, says Steinberg. The problem out here is just there's still a ton of dead and down, and that stuff takes a long time to kind of moisten up. So, we could have weather moderate, and then this stuff's going to be hot until it snows 3 feet, and there'll still be stuff out here that's smoking in the spring. So they're not going to really have any sort of solid containment on some of the stuff for a long time because of the fuel loading. My buddy Bert Stalter said there's 400 tons per acre out here, which is like a ridiculously high number, but he would know because he's a fuels expert. Snow's been thin in this area since 2010, says Kevin. You can get 6 feet every year in the past. Now you can drive the roads almost all winter. What about increasing winds? If they can get this winds are supposed to be coming from the west, I hear, and don't quote me on this because I haven't had time to look, but the guy told me that, who I think has good intel. So west winds are going to be good here in that they'll keep the fire from heading over towards Shaver and where people live. So west winds aren't a bad thing. We don't want big east winds until this is secure. And down here, this kind of portion kind of down here by Balch Camp is still kind of sketchy as far as them having access and being able to deal with this fire down in here. What news sources do you follow? I don't follow any news sources. I follow the Wildland Fire Forums. I follow the Intel feeds, and that's about it. Google News sometimes. All right, 400 tons per acre is insane. Yeah, you just got to remember that this area has had incredible mortality over the last 15 years from drought and insect kill and trees falling down and just also no fire forever and ever. And fire is kind of the great stick picker upper. Okay. Anyway, that's about it for Garnet right now. We'll keep doing daily streams on this. I'm trying to get some time out in the woods this fall, and so I'm not promising I'm gonna do a stream every day because I gotta get out of the freaking bat cave. But I want to go up and look at the blue fire while we're all hanging out here together. And if you have questions, we'll come back. Jim Jones tree started this fire. Oh man, not gonna, can't bust out any Kool-Aid jokes here. Okay, so, all right, so what else I want to talk about is just that fire season really never arrived in NorCal this year. We had a couple fires. We had some fires of significance, but nothing extraordinary. We had Pickett that burned in Napa County, and that was, a decent fire, decent sized fire, but nothing when you look at, okay, here's the Pickett fire. And when you look at the fire history layers of things like the Rocky and the Jerusalem and the Valley fires. So if you go back to the teens and the 20s and look at how much fire we've had there in certain years versus this little fire, the Pickett that burned I don't know, it got bigger than that, but it's 7,000 acres or something versus the Rocky fire that burned 70,000. That was one of the biggest fires of the year anywhere except the Klamath was the Pickett for Cal Fire. Cal Fire has only had one team deployment for their complex incident management teams, and that was Pickett. So yeah, we had like the green fire that really never did much. We had the Dillon fire, but like very mild year. And to me, it feels over, right? Like knock on wood, like we can always have an east wind driven event that can be destructive, that can come out of nowhere. But as far as like normal fire season, like it's cool, it's moist, and kind of the science to back that up is the ERC charts. So if we look at like where we're sitting in fuel moisture, kind of flammability, like for Northwestern California right now, like the average for this time of year is in gray, and we're down here like around the 30th percentile, right? So like the green line is where we're supposed to go in the next few days. Blue line's where we're at. So we're just a little below average right now, but we're dropping off a cliff in fuel kind of flammability. And so that kind of stuff tells you that like by the time you get down here, like you're looking at December or April kind of levels of fuel moisture. So what that tells me is we're going into prescribed fire season. And it always frustrates me that we can't like flip the switch quicker and be like, all right, yesterday was fire season, today is prescribed fire season. Because with these types of conditions, we can start putting fire on the ground safely. So to look at the ERCs for the Southern Sierra, we're also below average, right? And we're dropping down below the 40th percentile. So what that tells you is like, that's why these fires are really not doing much where they're not slope driven, is on the steep slope, they're kind of preheating the land above them. They've got they're fuel driven, they're slope driven, but that when they run out of that slope, then they're kind of almost going out, right? So it's good to keep in mind these seasonal type of charts because not every year has the potential for a Dixie fire. Like if you look at Northern California in 2021, like the ERCs were at record levels. And unless you're pushing kind of that 95th percentile and above, we don't get mega fires. Fires lay down at night. They don't make these enormous watershed scale runs. So it is interesting to see here that Garnet, even though it's been highly destructive and burning intensely in these really wild fuel choke canyons, it's not anywhere close to burning under extreme levels of drought or extreme levels of fuel dryness. Anyway, here's a map from the Southern California Predictive Services. It basically just shows that all of the indices are on their 3-day trend is a decrease in flammability all over the West Coast. And the outlook for fire potential is pretty low, just about everywhere for new starts, right? So I know it's counterintuitive that you have this huge fire that's putting up a crazy nuke bomb, and then to say like, well, fire hazard is actually pretty low right now, but sometimes the messaging gets mixed, and it's hard, for prescribed fire because as long as there's all these resources committed to ongoing incidents like that, then they don't want to let you burn, say in Butte County, because we have strike teams of Butte County engines maybe headed for Shaver Lake to help out CAL FIRE down there. So that's one of the reasons it's really hard to get burning done, is that we aren't very nimble at flipping the switch and turning off fire season and turning on prescribed fire season administratively, because there's still firefighters out, there's still resources committed out of the region or out of the county, and so people are still like not quite ready for you to go light off a burn in Forest Ranch. Energy release component. Yeah, you can look this stuff up. If you go here to, I'll give you this fuels danger rating link. This is called the Geographic Coordination Centers. We've got a whole video just on kind of predicting fire season, and you can check out more information on that. But they kind of explain like what are ERCs, and there's all kinds of great information on these sites about fuels danger. You can read up kind of the background information on how they figure this stuff out. And then these sites also are a good place to go to get kind of daily information, kind of summaries and stuff from the fires. Hey Now says, do the masticators help increase fuel moisture? Will rollout of masticators increase prescribed fire tolerance? Mastication is tough, right? I'll see if I can pull up some pictures of mastication. Problem with mastication is it depends on a lot. Mastication is grinding up brush to reduce its kind of fuel profile. Let's just see if we got some video of burning. It's tough to burn mastication, is what we've learned here kind of the hard way. Let's see, where's that at? We got to fire up the archive. It might be a minute. Mastication, the hard part is that there's lots of different types of mastication. And so basically you're taking a mower and you're going out and you're grinding up tall brush. And you're leaving all that all the ground up brush on the ground. And so if you think of like grinding up 8-foot tall manzanita, you generate this huge pile of hardwood kindling. And then that stuff lays out there and it gets super dry. And sometimes it's like 2 feet thick or a foot thick of this like best kindling you've ever seen in your whole life. And it's manzanita, so it takes years and years to break down. And so if you go in and you burn that mastication within the first 5 to 10 years, you can get so much heat from that giant pile of kindling burning that it'll kill every tree that you left. And so during the park fire here in Butte County, there was a project where we'd done a lot of prescribed fire on this guy's property, and then he had just masticated like a couple hundred acres, maybe 100 acres. And we were interested in burning it, but we knew that if we did, we'd kill every tree. And so we couldn't burn it. And then the park fire came and it burned through there, and they managed to stop the fire kind of on the edge of the mastication after it burned through there. But every tree that he left in that mastication, which was nice, kind of open pine stand after he's done, died because of the radiant heat. So mastication's tough because it's not a fuel reduction technique, it's a fuel rearrangement technique. And then as far as burning it goes, it sucks to mop up. Like, you'll be out there for days because it's like basically these smoldering piles. So I'm just going to pull up a video of burning mastication. Where is it though? So many videos. All right, so here we go. This is burning mastication. So they went through and they shredded this kind of like thickets of tan oak here and some of the smaller trees. And it burned pretty well. Like, the problem was that all the tan oak after we burned this, like, sprouted back like crazy. And so you go back there now and it's just like this crazy thicket of tan oak, like 8-foot tall tan oak scrubs. Because this stuff, tan oak, just after a fire, just like is released. It comes shooting out. Like within weeks, you can have like a 3-foot tall leader on the tan oak. So this guy's taking a picture. He's using his tool here, his tool handle, as a measuring stick, so you can take a photo and see how tall the flame lengths are. Mastication may be better than nothing, but don't quote me on that. So it really depends on the details of how you do it. Right, so this guy's, he's laying out, we're measuring the rates of spread of how fast the fire is going to move. So he laid down his tool, which is 5 feet long, and he, at the edge of the fire, and he put a stick out here. And then you take a photo, and they take a photo when it gets to the stick, and that's a way of saying, like, okay, it took 45 seconds to go 5 feet, therefore it's spreading, whatever, 10 chains an hour or something. So we're trying to document how the fire behaves under this specific kind of set of weather and fuel dryness. Before we burn this, we go out and we use probes to get the moisture of the sticks. This guy works for, he runs the fire program at Chico State Reserves, and they're training kind of future fire scientists. So we're trying to kind of treat each time we burn as an experiment and say, like, okay, what did we get? What we wanted? Was that hottest? Did we want it hotter? Here we know that it was 40% humidity and the 10-hour fuel moisture was 7%. Maybe next time we want to burn it at 5%, stuff like that. So that's kind of how, that's what he's doing here. And that's kind of one of my jobs when I go out with, and burn with Chico State is I'm training these guys on how to observe fire effects. So, mastication, burning better or nothing? Maybe. Okay, well, yeah, what I was saying was that it really depends on how you do it. Do you like grind it into the dirt? Do you shred it? Like, there's different types of heads. 15. This has been burning for about 15 minutes. And the area with some depth, where it got lit with some depth, we're getting fire whirls about 12 feet tall. Winds are kind of at our backs here. Our smoke's going pretty much straight up and lifting a little out to the northeast.
Go ahead.
In places where we haven't lit depth, just backing slowly.
Never mind. Ignore.
All right, so the tough thing about this is just that like these crews were out here mopping up for like a week because some of these piles were so deep that they just kind of smoldered, and you can go and spray a bunch of water on there and then it just kind of smolders some more, and it's like trying to put out a really heavy campfire. So the consensus from this was like, don't burn mastication in the spring when it's still kind of moist. Burn it like late fall before it's going to rain like 6 inches, so you don't have to mop it up yourself. Let the weather mop it up, because this was miserable. It was a huge amount of work, huge commitment of time and resources. You know, we burned like maybe 20 or 30 acres, but then like it took days and days to mop it up. So mastication is it's a popular tool. Foresters like it because you do it and then people can see that like it happened. Like there's immediate kind of immediate results. B-roll. So these are Chico State people.
Who's it coming with? It's in the.
So a lot of the people on this burn are volunteers. Volunteer burn boss, helper, Dan Kelleher, veteran prescribed fire instructor. Terra Fuego Resource Foundation is out there. They were actually kind of helping make the project work. It's a lot of good stuff. This is why I'm excited about the weather cooling off, is because prescribed fire season it's a lot of fun, a lot of learning, a lot of collaboration, and working with Chico State is great. Like, they're really dialed. They burn all the time, and we talked about that. So if you're interested in becoming like a prescribed fire expert, and you are, you can go to Chico State and get a degree in wildland management, and then you get to go out and do this kind of stuff. So oftentimes it seems like the outcome of like what exactly we accomplished with the burn is less important than just like getting people out burning together and teaching them how to talk on the radio, teaching them how to think like as a unit, and getting them comfortable with the idea that, you know, people can just put fire on the ground once they build these skills, and it doesn't have to be that complicated. So that's burning mastication. So like I said before, there's just one of the things that's tricky about specking mastication or anything else is that you kind of have to know the equipment. So there's mowers that just have a flail head that spin, or like, you know, a blade that spins around that goes on the front of like a bobcat or something, and those just shred the material and scatter it everywhere and leave a lot of fuel. And then there's drum type ones that they call the Fecon head. And those spin, and if you are working in a place that doesn't have a lot of rocks, you can kind of grind the wood chips into the dirt. And that's the best from a fire perspective because the stuff breaks down quicker. But you can't do that where there's rocks. So if you're in rocky ground and you're trying to masticate, you end up leaving stuff too tall. You got brush everywhere. And depending on your species, it might just sprout back stronger. So it's kind of a tough trade-off. You know, I don't love mastication most of the time just because fire can still spread through there. And who knows what you're doing to all the plants and everything by laying down this like 6-inch layer of wood chips. You know, if you have rare plants or plants you're worried about or plants you're tending, mastication can be kind of just like mulching the entire site. Water Tank says he called in a smoldering pile of chips a month after the Potter fire. Yeah, wood chips are bad too. So that's a good lesson is like if you're doing chipping work along a road and you want to burn it eventually, like haul the chips or know that they're going to be a real pain and they're going to smolder for a long time. So like anytime you're prepping a unit to burn, then you're anywhere near the edge of it where you're going to have to mop up. Like we don't mop up the entire unit. We usually mop up 50 feet in or 100 feet in from the edge. But if that 100 feet in from the edge is full of wood chips because you went through with a chipper and you thinned everything to get ready to burn it and then you blew all those chips out there, then the chips smolder forever and they're a real pain to mop up. So you're better off to haul them, dump them somewhere else that you're not going to burn. But that's a real common mistake is someone says, yeah, I thinned this, I chipped it, now I want to burn it. And you're like, well, where are all the chips? And they're like, oh, they're all along the road. It's like, well, now we're going to have to scratch a line to like keep fire out of the chips. For that same reason, it's like often we're water limited, you know, like up on these ridge tops and you have to go get water somewhere. You have to haul it. You have to, you know, you can't just like plug into a hydrant and like put up a sprinkler and like every gallon of water that you put out through your hose, you have to like haul in a truck from somewhere else. Right. All right. I just wonder if I have any other good kind of videos to show here of burning mastication. This is an area where a lot of pile burning was done.
You good?
And so this land had a huge amount of, like, when the guy bought it, the manzanita was like 8 feet tall and super thick. And instead of masticating it, which would have made it hard to do what we're doing here without killing all these trees, he pile burned it over the last like 10 years. Now that he's done all that pile burning, it's like, it's super simple. We're out here with a bunch of volunteers, burning, I don't know, 5 or 6 acres. This is my kid, my friend Wolfie with the Prescribed Burn Association. And this is pretty low complexity. But if your forest has been thin for years and looks like this, like it's not,
Dallas?
Doesn't have to be super hard to burn.
Can you bring fire down the dozer line a little bit?
Yes, I put Dallas kind of in charge of that side now.
Should I not have asked him to do that?
No, it's totally fine. You're relaying what Dan wanted.
Okay.
That flank got a little neglected on instruction, so they were still way up there, so I just had them come down a little bit.
It's hard over there.
Hey, Ezra, don't get above strips. Yeah, always stay below your strips.
So here my kid is like gonna light a line here below my coworker. Yay, fun times. So Prescribed Burn Association, if you get working with the PBA, then you go out and do stuff like this, and it's pretty awesome, and it gives me hope. But it's gonna be hard to like scale this up and do it on, thousands of acres with volunteers. Like people need to get paid at some point. But this is what the PBA is all about. It's like take your friends, take your kids, go burn someone's land. We had a couple engines here. The landowner has a dozer. We had a water tender. Cal Fire comes out and kind of watches But Cal Fire's gotten more comfortable over the last like 5 years of just like they'll come and see, and if everything's going good, then they'll like go back and do their other stuff. Kind of curious if I got any stuff from prowling around in the masticated stuff that burned hot. Black oak is kind of a dream fuel. Like if you have black oak mixed with ponderosa pine, which is really common in the Sierra Nevada foothills, it gives you a great window of opportunity. Those oak, in the middle of the winter, these oak leaves can dry out even after you've had quite a bit of rain, and then you can get an opportunity to burn in the oak and pine litter. Sorry, it's kind of jerky. Here's a little more complex prescribed burning going on in ponderosa pine. And unfortunately, so this all got done in 2022. And unfortunately, every tree in this stand died in the park fire because the trees were still too dense. Even though we burned this out, cleaned up all the pine litter, cleaned up all these kind of dead branches. Like, these trees were just still too dense. There are too many. Like we probably needed to log out like 70% of the stems in this for it to be able to survive in the part of the landscape it was in, a fire that was going to burn when it was hot as it was during the park fire. This is plain a little jerky, but basically it's this what we call strip head fire, where we've got lighters kind of coming through in, maybe 30 feet apart. And the idea is that your strip burns up to the next strip. And that kind of keeps it from all, like if you just ran one strip across the whole way, it could get a lot of momentum. But you do a strip like this and it's backing and it's going forward. So when this strip of head fire gets to this next strip, this area is out of, like, it's already burned the fuel. So you get these kind of like collection of 30-foot strips that are head fire, but they aren't like a strip that gains like 1,000 feet of momentum. Okay, so that's enough of the prescribed fire detour. I was going to jump up real quick and look at the blue fire. Talked to a guy in the blue fire today. I just wanted to share some of his insights. Thanks for... Red Ryan says, is there some science modeling behind that as far as terrain goes? Would be brilliant. So, and where does one learn how to thin their land, like hire a pro? So yeah, it depends on like, so in California, there's a law that's professional forester's law, which is that basically, unless you're a registered professional forester, like you can't come out and consult and tell someone how many trees to cut. Basically, you have to hire a registered professional forester. So like for me, it's like, I've done a lot of thinning work for friends and for the feds, but like I can't come out and tell someone like, oh, you should take this down to 40-foot spacing, because I'm not a forester. So if I actually did that, I could actually like, get arrested or get fined. So yeah, you can talk to like someone who works with cooperative extension, EC cooperative extension. You can talk to a forester if you know someone who knows a forester. It can be pretty casual. Like unless you're selling logs, you can do quite a bit of thinning on your own land without getting permits or anything in a lot of places. But it's good to consult with a forester to kind of figure out like a big picture comp plan. And there's grants you can get through the NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service, to do consulting, to get like a consultation with a forester. Those are called EQIP. So if you have a decent chunk of land, you can get an EQIP grant, and then they'll actually help you make a plan and help you pay for a contractor and potentially help you get it burned. So some of the projects we're doing up here that we're burning on are like, have had EQIP funding to prep them. Thanks, good question. All right, yeah, so check out your local PBA. There's a website, calpba.org, and that shows you a map of where the PBAs are established. And then PBAs are also kind of a great pathway to get more training. And so this, in the fall, usually there's prescribed fire training exchanges, Trexes, that are, some of them are like, a lot of them are already all booked up for now, but if you connect with the PBA and get on their mailing list, then you can find out in the spring or in summer when the Trex events are scheduled, and you can get signed up for the Trex events. And that's its whole own kind of prescribed fire training party. So good stuff going on. We're doing we're doing 2 Trexes this fall. We're doing Trex here with the Maidu tribe in Butte County, and then I'm doing a Forester's Trex with at UC Berkeley Blodgett Reserve. So we'll be covering some of those. I'll be like shooting video from those Trexes when I can. The one here in Butte County I'm helping run, and the one in Blodgett I'm going as a trainer. So hoping to run around the camera and kind of talk about what that's all about. So anyway, Syad Valley here, the Blue Fire, we talked a bit about it continuing to spread kind of at a leisurely pace. And let's go see if I can bring up current map. Yeah, so not a lot of big new spread on the blue, but I talked to a buddy, and he's on a hotshot crew out here. And he basically said that there's kind of a strategy, a plan to, the PCT goes through the bottom here, and that the command team would like to cut a direct line here to cut off this part of the fire and go down this ridge to the PCT. And he said, well, that looks easy on the map, but the problem is that there's like hundreds of like 6-foot diameter snags on this line, and to put a fire line in here is going to require like a crazy amount of both energy and risk, right? Because these trees have been standing dead for 11 years, and all the trees that are smaller have fallen over, have rotted and fallen over. So what's left are these towering like 5 or 6 foot diameter dead trees that have been standing for a decade that have, you know, rotten tops and stuff, and so super dangerous. And so I think this is one of those places where there's a lot of argument about like how aggressive we should be with firefighting, and there's always a lot of kind of shit talking among people that believe that just go direct, put the fire out, keep it small, minimize the impact. And then, but when it comes down to it, it's like, well, okay, well, yeah, that looked easy it looks easy to me from my chair here on my digital map, and it looks easy from wherever this person's sitting who's just like, Forest Service can't do anything right, put the fire out small. It's like, okay, well, you know, say we put 2 hotshot crews down this ridge for a week, cutting down giant old rotten trees, and someone gets hit with a tree down in here. It's been smoked in every day here. So basically the crews, some of them are like camped out on top of the ridge, but down where the fire's burning, there's an inversion layer, and so they haven't had helicopters on this fire for like a week to be able to do very much because the smoke. And so in this country, we know that like if someone gets hit by a tree back here, like, and you're way down this freaking hill, so it's like the bottom of the hill is 2,600 feet, and the top of the hill is close to 6,000 feet. I mean, that's a lot of relief, right? That's a big ass mountain. And so if you're down in the middle of nowhere here and your crew buddy gets hit by a tree and has a compound fracture of his tibia and he's bleeding out, like, you're not going to get him out of there before he dies. And that's happened many times. And that happened, you know, here during the 2008 fires. A kid named Andy Palmer got hit by a snag. They tried to get him out of there lots of different ways. They finally got him hoisted out of there, and he bled out in the helicopter on the way to the hospital because it took hours to get him to a hospital. And so that's what's on, the crew boss mind is like, hey, yeah, right now the fire is backing through this old burn, spreading, it's cleaning up the old burn. It's not killing the big trees. We like, as I said, we went from being from being in fire season to being in prescribed fire season. And so these backing fires here, like if there wasn't a declaration of fire season, like locals would probably be ready to go out and burn units in the ground, because we've been burning up here in October every year. So, okay, you got backing fire, beneficial effects in a 10-year-old burn, and people are asking you to put in a line down this steep-ass ridge and fall a bunch of huge old-growth snags. What's the sense of urgency here? Well, one thing is that you could have a big east wind event and get something like a Slater fire. But on the other hand, this entire area burned 11 years ago. So like you don't have this like heavy dead and down component, thick ass forest. Like this fire all burned because this was like crazy thick forest that hadn't had fire for 100 years. So you got this fire burning in the middle of this 11-year-old burn scar under less than extreme conditions. We just looked at the ERC charts, right, for the Northwest Mountains of California. Like, bam, like we're solidly in like prescribed fire season. So there's this back and forth that happens. The crews, the hotshot crews might just, they're tactfully, suggesting probably that, hey, we don't think you should do that. We think you should just let this back through this area out here until it rains. Or pick a plan that has a better option for like extricating injured firefighters. It doesn't rely on helicopters that can't fly because it's smoky. So there's a lot of that goes on fires that no one ever hears about. It's kind of this give and take between the people that are being asked to do these things and the people that are looking at maps and thinking about the big picture strategy. And we talked about that with Bethany Hanna on our interview the other night. Like, okay, well, what happens if every crew says no? There is a procedure basically for hotshot crews to refuse risk. Like, hey, we're not going to hike down into the fire because we know that the fire can come out of there and kill us. So it's like risk a lot to save a lot, risk a little to save a little. Like here you can be asking people to risk a lot to put out a fire that's doing good work. And who would know better what kind of work the fire is doing than the crew that's been out there for like a week and a half looking at the fire every day. So that's it's the Blue Fire. Not a lot going on there. Same on Dillon. Here's Dillon Fire with a couple days of spread. We looked at this the other day. Not much going on there. Same story. It's like, as a lot of the things we've been looking at, the fire has kind of eaten the fuel that's uphill of it, and now it's backing, right? So these fires kind of run in fits and starts. Like, okay, right now it's backing for days. If you happen to have this fire cross the creek on a day that you've got big, dry kind of slope line winds, then you're going to get some runs. The fire might back in here and burn out this, but that's happened for thousands of years, and that's kind of why you get this kind of patchy severity pattern in these forests. Is hey, previous fire burned hot up these slopes that face down canyon, and then it backed down the other side, right? So a lot of the patterning you see out here is the result of thousands of years of trees deciding how they're going to get along with fire. All right, so yeah, share the channel, please. R.I.P. Andy Palmer for sure. A lot of these stories, like I talk about with Andy Palmer, there's what's called I put something up there to Google. There's what we call it's basically used to be called an accident report. Now it's called a facilitated learning analysis, because they found that if you said it was an investigation or an accident report, people tended to think they're going to get blamed. But if you call it a facilitated learning analysis, and you don't assign blame as much, or you don't point fingers at individuals, you get a deeper understanding of what actually happened. And there's this real tendency for all of us to assign blame, and oftentimes what we really care about after an incident, after a bad accident, is like, well, how can we not have that happen again? And so language is important. And it seems kind of like bullshit to be like, it's not an investigation, it's a facilitated learning analysis. But I mean, the proof is in the pudding. Like, people have, as the culture has changed around looking at bad things that have happened, lessons learned they've flowed freer. So if you Google like Andy Palmer accident report or FLA, you'll find some really amazing like work that people have done to try to understand like, how did this accident happen? What can we learn from it? One thing that changed big time after Andy Palmer's death was teams now start mapping out like time to the nearest hospital. And they might base tactics on that. They might say like, hey, we're not going to fly crews into this ridge because if someone gets hurt there, they're going to die before we get them out of there. So, there's the Wildland Fire Lessons Learned Center. Eric Wood. It's good seeing Eric Wood on here. We used to work together. He was a CAL FIRE guy. What happened with Andy Palmer's accident was pretty interesting, was that the head of the Park Service fire program flew in. The guys who'd seen their buddy get crushed by a tree, got kind of kettled up in a hotel room somewhere so the investigation team could grill them. And they just, had been through this crazy, intense experience of like watching their buddy die. And the chief flew in and she grabbed them and took them home. And that to me is leadership. Like, she's like, it matters less who dropped this tree than like not taking these kids who are like 18 or 19 and away from home and like suffering through this crazy ordeal and putting them in, like interrogating them, right? Like, she took them home. And so, yeah, to me, that's leadership, like, yeah, everyone wants to know. If you read the report, like, no one knows who killed Ant, like how he died. The people who know, there's people who know what happened, but it's not written down. And in my opinion, yeah, that's probably fine that we don't know. The person who dropped the tree knows. But in the end, it's like, well, something bad happened. And yeah, it's probably better to take those kids home. Salt fire. I don't have much to report on the salt fire. Can fly down and look at the mapping. Okay. Salt fire is burning down by eastern Fresno County, by Coalinga. And I'm just going to bring up perimeter here from NIFC. This is from the 3rd. And this is a perimeter from the 7th. Looks like the fire really hasn't spread. Like, if you look at this perimeter, what's going on here, people? All right, so yeah, this is spread of the salt fire from the 3rd until the 7th. Doesn't look like this part of the fire spread at all. This part out here is a different fire. So I think salt's done. I don't think it's really spreading anymore. All right. Okay, well, y'all clean up your properties, do your reading. We appreciate your support, and I'm gonna play the outro, and probably see you again tomorrow. But I got stuff to do too. So if nothing big is happening tomorrow, you probably won't see me. But if Garnet burns another 5,000 acres, I'll get on and do something about it. I always mean just to get on for like, 10 minutes to say something, but it just doesn't work that way. Need to get Steinberg back in here to help me run all these computers. See y'all.